Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Joe, we are on the brink of history. This is canonical episode 399. It also happens to be the first episode of what we've traditionally done, kind of our ramp up to a new season, because today we are going to break down the conference race, a new conference race, and give our national preview picks.
Yeah, things are becoming very real. I know that we say that quite a bit, but we're reaching these milestones, these achievements throughout the preseason that make it very real. You get the preseason magazines coming out, and obviously for all the video game folks, that NCAA game is dropping here very soon, it appears. And then a big piece of that puzzle is Media Day, which just occurred earlier on in Las Vegas for the Big 12 Conference. One of those things, again, when you start to see ASU coupled with the likes of Texas Tech and West Virginia and Oklahoma State all up at the same event, and realize that this is just not a series of non-conference games or bowl games. This is real life. Again, makes this move to the Big 12 very, very real as we step our way into this 2024 season.
Yeah, the vibe was very different being up there in Vegas. I was there on Tuesday for ASU's contingent. U of A went on the following day on Wednesday. And yeah, it's very different. The vibe for the last couple of years, and it's like last year, the Pac-12 Media Day was in one of the Vegas Strip hotels, like nightclub, very kind of, very nightclubby vibe and very, George Kliavkoff-ish. But then, of course, this one is in Allegiant Stadium, this $4 billion Death Star out in the desert. That's just pretty remarkable. And so it was on the field where the Raiders play. I talked to Hode Rubino for our little Media Day podcast on the emblem and the 50-yard line, and just kind of having the differences between Brett Yormark and his very aggressive stance and during his keynote address versus the kind of on the heels of Kliavkoff the last couple of years. Pretty striking. But altogether, I think Joe, ASU is in a much better place now than they were a year ago in terms of the strategic picture.
All these Raiders references, man, I'm trying to think of an Antonio Pierce joke to use, and I'd really like to, but my creativity is a little dry right now. So just insert one for those of you listening and watching. Just insert your own Antonio Pierce joke. There, I'm sure plenty of them to give there. This is a real thing that's happening. The Devils are obviously on good footing. It is such an odd thing to see the trace remnants of the Pac-12, Pac-2, just little bits that I've seen over the last couple of days. I was having a text with my cousin, and there was this picture of something that appeared to be from a media day for the Pac used to be 12, and I'm literally like, is this real or is this fake? Like, I couldn't tell. Like, are they still doing something with these people, or is this just the internet having fun? But yeah, it's crazy to think how far things have come in a little less than a year. It was obviously just early August of last year when there was that crazy, insane week where, would they or wouldn't they join the Big 12 as it pertained to ASU and, of course, other schools as well. So now you fast forward 11, almost 12 months, and here things are. ASU is in this 16-team league with a lot of new faces and new players and things like that. And even us, we're getting used to it. We're going to talk about some of this, and it's a lot less of a, automated thing as has been in the past years in the Pac-12, especially pre-transfer portal, where it's like, all right, we know these teams, we know these players, we've seen them around for years, and the new faces, all right, we're going to get to know those. Everything is new now, so we're as new to it as anybody else.
Yeah, definitely said Pac-12 more than a few times up in Vegas the other day. And a lot of new faces, and it's obviously, although a lot of excitement and just a lot of cool stuff that's happening. And you have a conference on the come up, and it is RIP Pac-12. It's sad, and it was pretty cool. You mentioned like they at least the Pac-12 or Pac-2 or whatever now with a new commissioner seems to be a little self-aware. They had like that open bar, quote unquote, media day or whatever, media session where they had the mascots just kind of sipping on stage. At least they're having fun with it, and who knows? Maybe in this area of consolidation and realignment, we'll be conference mates with those folks yet again. But on this episode, Joe, as we like to do, and we truly kind of turn the page from the off season to ramp up to the season ahead. We take a kind of macro view of the conference and the national playoff picture. Of course, it's the first year of the expanded 12-team playoff, in which the Big 12 is guaranteed at least one representative. After Joe and I give our thoughts on the conference and national picture, we also be talking to a new ASU commit, running back Demarius Robinson, a guy who's a very explosive player, and so you'll hear from a little bit later on. But Joe, let's start off with just maybe taking a rundown of the conference. Get some thoughts about, as you mentioned, this is a lot of new teams, perhaps a lot of unfamiliarity that's going on, and then obviously it might be on the flip side of that unfamiliarity. Maybe some of the media who voted ASU 16th, dead last in the preseason media poll. Not to skip ahead, but I did not have in my ballot. I did not have ASU 16th. We'll get to that in a little bit, but just in terms of fairness, let's start off with going in order, top to bottom, of what the final aggregate media poll was. And number one with 20 first place votes, and spoiler, one of those 20 is mine. I had Utah winning the conference. They're number one atop my ballots. And Joe, this is a team that we kind of know the faces, the formula by now. Whittingham's been there forever. 7th year of Cam Rising in this college football sport. Brent Keithy's back at tight end. So some familiar faces, but also one of the most entrenched identities in college football.
So before I jump into that, one little thing to interject. We didn't have any news to share, but don't want to keep this till the end of this episode. Let us not forget to remind y'all, we're starting to push it out there on the social media, and I'm sure by this point, hopefully, but just as yet another reminder, Brad and I are going to be out and about in the month of August, on the scene, on location. So just write these dates down. We're working on the times. That is part of this whole process. August the 3rd. That's a Saturday. Cactus Sports, we talk about them all the time. Obviously, they're located at 514 South Mill Avenue. Brad and I are going to be setting up shop there for a little bit. As we've mentioned before, it'd be very similar, if not identical, to what we did at Burrito Express when they had a grand opening earlier this year. We set up shop in the store location. We'll talk to some guests. We'll have a good time. Encourage all of you to come do some shopping to prep for the football season, to prep for the school year. And certainly we'd love to chop it up with you, and any guests that we have, I'm sure would like to meet you as well. So just stay tuned for more information, but mark your calendars. Saturday, August 3rd, get on down to Cactus Sports. In addition to that, of course, the big dog on August the 17th. So we got 2 weeks later. So 2 times in 3 weeks, we need to be seeing y'all. 100 Mile Brewing. It's right there on Rural and the 202. Sun Devil owned and operated. Brad and I will be doing our second ever true live show there. And we will have that we tested out the sound. For those of you who were there with us at the Graduate last summer, we have made sure that won't be an issue this time around. Brad and I are going to be there, and we will be joined by the new athletic director, Graham Rossini. He is committed. He will be there not only to talk with Brad and me, but to take your questions as well. We're working on other guests, and we are not aiming low. We're trying to get the best of the best out there for you. It's going to be a great time. Once again, that is on August the 17th. We're still working on the time for that as well, but we're thinking maybe late afternoon, early evening as the starting point. Nothing too early, nothing too late, but we will keep you updated. But once again, just mark your calendar, set aside the time. You do not want to miss either. Once again, that's Saturday, August 3rd at Cactus Sports and Saturday, August 17th at 100 Mile Brewing. Now,
all right, Joe,
all right, you got that
thoughts
part.
on the Utes.
There you go.
ASU's rival. I will die on that hill.
What's that?
I will die on the hill that Utah is a rival, especially now that it's spanning multiple. I think 3 conferences now.
We will see. I will maintain my stance. But while I may or may not agree on that, I do agree on them deserving to be atop this conference in the predictions. Last season was a down year for them. A down year that would be an up year for ASU in many circumstances. They won 8 games, and usually that's pretty good. But that's actually the second fewest wins from a Utah team in a non-COVID year since 2013. I bring that up. Obviously, that sounds weird. Oh, you're talking about how they had a down year. How are you talking about them being the conference favorite now? I just don't feel like you can keep that program down for too terribly long. The coaching staff that they have, the continuity that they have, and the way that they do things. because there were even those seasons in the early Pac-12 days, you know, the 11, 12, 13, around then when Utah was winning like 5 games or so. And obviously they evolved through that. You know, Rising, he had the major injury issues last year, and that's a difference maker of in itself. I mean, if he's out there healthy, it's not an 8-win team. So you don't have every team in the conference has got some questions, even those at the top. You know, there's no absolute shoe-in. There are obviously a few teams that deserve to be mentioned among the top, and then others follow suit. But I think Utah deserves the most faith compared to any other team in the Big 12 as far as, you know, even if there are some questions, you feel like they can be answered. So again, even though they're replacing some key players, they bring some of those major players back. Rising and Keithy alone are worth quite a few wins. So this is a team that I think, and a lot of folks agree, you know, you see these early polls and things like that. You know, people have Utah as a top 10 to top 12 team. So I think it's a fairly consensus view that folks think they're going to have a good year. So again, they've, whether you consider them a rival or not, they've built up, they've just done too much not to deserve credit, you know, for what they have done, what they can do. So yeah, I agree that they should be predicted as the top team in the conference.
I mean, they're adding some explosiveness, and receiver Dorian Singer, a name familiar to a lot of Pac-12 fans as well. And yeah, their identity is just so established at this point of just how they've bullied the Pac-12. Now I think it's going to be interesting now moving into a conference that has a tougher identity. And, you know, this is not the Big 12 that was the air raid of the, you know, maybe the mid-2010s. This is a conference that is built on physicality, a lot of good defenses and strong run games, and that just, I think, really fits Utah's profile. And you know what you're going to get. You know, the names change on defense, but they're always going to be really good, and almost kind of the Big 12 reigning version of Utah. Kansas State came in second in the media poll with 19 first-place votes, just one shy there. I think right now the big question is, you know, is quarterback Avery Johnson going to be ready to be the guy? You know, Will Howard was their starter last year. He's now at Ohio State chasing a national championship. But when Avery Johnson got to play, he was super excited. I watched him in the bowl game a little bit. The dual threat ability there, he's going to be aided by a great running back tandem. DJ Giddens is one of the best in the conference. They get Dylan Edwards from Colorado, and they return most of what was one of the best defenses overall in the conference. I mean, this is a team that is just has that identity under Chris Kleiman, and just the Wildcats are going to be really strong. And I think when you see these top two teams that were atop the media poll in Utah and K-State, they're just almost kind of mirror reflections of each other.
Yeah, I mean, that one, again, from having not seen them week in, week out, you know, for years, as was the case with Pac-12 opponents or a team like Utah, you know, the projections and predictions are a little tougher to put together. That quarterback transfer, obviously, lost Howard to Ohio State. I mean, that's a big loss. So that's going to be the big thing there. You know, they're a team that they're very well coached, so I wouldn't put it past them to be successful. I feel like there's you know, probably about a 4 to 5 team log jam of teams that I think really can compete to be in the conference championship game, and they're among them. I think I place Utah as the favorite, but Kansas State is certainly among those teams that should very well be in that conversation. I don't know if I put them second, but I don't put them terribly far below that. Again, I'm with you, Utah at the top, with the others at Utah at the top, and I think there's a lot of interchangeable parts for kind of like 2 through 4, 2 through 5.
Yeah, and Brett Yormark, during his keynote address, mentioned that he felt that the Big 12 is the deepest conference in the country. And when we're asked in the Q&A session about that, he kind of doubled down. I mean, he thinks that from top to bottom, this is going to be the toughest conference in the country. And you kind of look, the state of the Big Ten maybe, and you got obviously Ohio State, who probably is a national title favorite. Michigan's reloading. And some of the other conferences might be a little more top-heavy. But I really do agree with that point that this is a conference that just, maybe you go 10, 11, 12 teams deep of just, potential bowl caliber teams, of a couple that could, if things fall a certain way, could make a run to a playoff spot, and kind of progressing down the list. Number 3 on the media poll was Oklahoma State. No stranger at this point. ASU's third year playing them. They received 14 first place votes. And obviously the big storyline here is running back Ollie Gordon, one of the best in the country. After he kind of got off to a little slow start, wasn't used a whole lot, but then they rode him to an All-American season, one of the very best in the country. Had a recent DUI, and And some interesting comments from Coach Gundy at Media Day, basically saying, who amongst us hasn't done it 1,000 times? That his punishment's going to be that we're going to give him 50 carries in the first game, which get your mileage out of that as you will. But I mean, with 21 starters back, they're returning 85% of the production. Great offensive line, really a pair of really standout linebackers there. But I think the big question here, Joe, is can Alan Bowman be more consistent? 15 touchdowns, 14 picks a season ago. And when ASU saw them early, they were still playing that weird three quarterback system that I think ultimately helped lead to a loss to South Alabama earlier in the year. But Bowman was the guy who ultimately won that job. But this is a team that's going to be very good, and like you said, one of those teams in that kind of upper echelon that can make a run at the title. And
they're one that, again, I'm not going to pretend at this particular point to be super fluent with all the teams. I mean, that's kind of more of a thing that I do a little bit deeper into the off season. But this is a team that I might have trended toward, maybe playing Utah in the conference championship game, maybe pick them second. As you mentioned, Ollie Gordon, he was the Doak Walker Award winner last year, ran for over 1,700 yards, 21 touchdowns. That off-field incident seems like it's just not going to be something that really, affects him on the field. They also have some very talented receivers. You talked about Bowman. He had his numbers are very, interesting. He passed for a solid amount of yards, but the touchdowns and interceptions don't necessarily blow you away. If you get him in a spot where he's that unquestioned full season guy and not one of two or three, does that make a difference for him? So, offensively, and obviously under Gundy, Oklahoma State just historically has had some real high-powered offenses. So that's, nothing new around those parts. So when you talk about a conference where there's a lot of potential parity, they've got the experience of that coach, a little quirky, but hey, you know what? That's fun sometimes. So that is definitely a team that I think they have the potential to be within the top 3, top 2. Wouldn't shock me if they're playing, for the conference crown by the time it's all said and done. Yes, it'd be real interesting to see what happens, not just a quarterback, but on the defensive side. It's going to be year 2 under Brian Nardo as their DC. They were last in the conference in yards per game and gave up some big plays, but ultimately kind of made some plays when it counted. Number 4 on the media poll, Kansas, with 5 first-place votes. And I think right now it's just going to be a question of, can Jalen Daniels, their quarterback, stay healthy? Because he's one of the most electric players in the country. And they, longtime backup quarterback Jason Bean, he's not there anymore. And Bean was a very important contributor because Daniels has not been able to stay healthy from start to finish. But I think that if Daniels is able to do that, this is a team under Lance Leipold and that imaginative offense, and you got a new OC and Jeff Grimes. This could be a conference contender as well. They got a great secondary as well, but I think it really, maybe amongst any team in this conference, I think the season might hinge on just the health of one player. Yeah, I mean, it's what Leipold's done there, man. I mean, it's nothing short of incredible. I mean, Kansas, it wasn't that long ago that, they were like the laughing stock of college football. You think about that incredible run that the University of Arizona had when they lost a lot of games in a row. It was like them and Kansas as the teams that had lost the most in a row. So for that to turn around, 6 wins in 2022 and a 9-4 finish last year, back-to-back bowl game appearances, that is not something that happens all that often. I'm looking through things. In the history of Kansas football, there has only been one other time that they went to back-to-back bowl games, and that was during that, era about 15 years ago when they were rocking. They made an Orange Bowl appearance. So if they go to a bowl game this year, which obviously is the expectation, right? At a minimum, you expect them to do more than that. The first time in program history that they've gone to bowl games in 3 straight years. So this is a very interesting time for Kansas football. So the expectations are there. Some may have them perhaps even as, like a preseason ranked team. That would not be a shocker. They might be kind of on the cusp there. But yeah, the potential is there. But as you mentioned, you got to stay healthy because I feel like I'll say it time and time again in the league of parity. I mean, we saw how, the cannibalistic nature of the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 after dark. But man, that kind of thing could be very present here in the Big 12 because I envision there to be a heck of a lot of parity. You got a lot of teams that don't know a bunch about each other because they haven't played, with the exception of, ASU, Oklahoma State, or some other mixes and matches there, but by and large, everybody's going to have a few teams on their schedule, if not many, that they're just not that familiar with. So you can be caught by surprise. So a team like Kansas, this could be a very pivotal season for them. Are they going to keep up with that, 8+ win range, that bowl eligibility range, or are they going to get knocked down a peg? So they're going to be a team to keep an eye on. But again, very, very well coached. I'm actually quite surprised they've been able to keep Leipold there as long as they have. I'm shocked that another school hasn't lured him away. That's certainly the Kansas gain.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. They're really seeming to, obviously a basketball school, one of the true blue bloods and hoops, but they're, I believe, doing a complete renovation or significant renovations on their stadium, so they're really pouring some more money into the football program and now getting some of those results to match as well. Number 5 on the preseason media poll, that team down south, the Wildcats. They were the only other team to get first place votes with 3. I have to imagine, I personally think, if Jed Fish stays there and they lose several key players, that this might have been a Wildcat team that was number 1 in this media poll. But obviously they were able to kind of keep the cornerstone, keep the franchise, and Noah Fafita and T-Mac, even though they lost some guys. It's going to be a very, very potent passing game as well. Do have some questions about whether they, on defense and in the trenches, especially making the move for a team that perhaps geared for Pac-12 play. Now you're going to be being in presumably some more physical matchups in the Big 12. But this is, as long as Fafita and T-Mac are there, they're going to have a chance in every game. Yeah,
obviously, very safe to say that they took some losses over the course of this offseason with the coaching staff and players, and that's just an objective way to say it. They've had talent on offense, and the defense is what really pushed them over the top last year. That defensive line got gutted largely because of the coach departure, and a couple players, chose to follow him to Texas. They had, they had a multitude of departures that were very, very, critical. They made a handful of additions, some kind of late in the game in the transfer portal. So we'll see how that irons out. They had their 2024, high school recruiting class gutted, at least the top of it. I think they had something like their top 5 or 6 signees all go elsewhere, and most, if not all, went to Washington to follow Fish. So you put that all together, it's going to be a very interesting season for them. Now, obviously, they certainly return the talent to be a very, very good team. I would say, the realistic floor is probably in the 8-win range. Can they get back to double digits again? That's certainly a possibility. Is it now or never? Not necessarily, but if you just kind of look deeper into it, McMillan's he's the last year. He's going to be gone. He's going to be bowl eligible. You have some other, not bowl eligible, but draft eligible. You have some other players that are getting up there in draft eligibility. So, we'll see. We'll see. This is going to be a critical year for this program, because if they're able to maintain that high level, then that can set them up for the future. If they don't, and if they fall well short of it, let's just say hypothetically they have a very disappointing season, then that can send things in a different way as well. So I think even on a national scale, and trying to be objective and take emotion and bias and rivalry stuff out of it, on a national scale, I think Arizona is going to be a very interesting team to watch, or just to monitor what they do, just because of all the changes that occurred. Obviously, they weren't completely gutted personnel-wise to where you're saying, oh, they're just back down to a 2, 3, 4-win team, but you just don't know if they're going to be a 10-win team again. So that's going to be interesting. I know that not always are things related, but I'm going to be curious to see if this they have a weird little mystical, like, second-year slump situation for quarterbacks who shine early. Think back to guys like Anu Solomon. Think back to guys like Khalil Tate. They had that
come here to run the triple.
Yeah, right. Exactly. With like four Ps, whatever it is. Again, and this is not just me being a hater, even though I am that. You think about it and look at it. Anu Solomon had that killer year in 2014, took him to the Fiesta Bowl. By the time 2015 came around, he wasn't even their starter. Left, went to Baylor. Didn't do anything for him ever again. Khalil Tate had that, that 1 year where he showed some flash, and then that one full season where he was everybody's darling, put him on Sports Illustrated, said hand him the Heisman. By the end of that year, it wasn't anything special. So it's just kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting how there's been a little bit of something. I think maybe if you can kind of throw Willie Tuitom into that, that was dang near 20 years ago now. But again, just a recent little trend in the last decade of a couple quarterbacks who were incredible, as whether it's true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, or just their first opportunity for significant action. They get that done. They get on a national scale. You think that they're going to be running things for a long time. and it just doesn't happen. Again, does something that happened with a new Solomon really relate to what's going to happen with Noah Fifita? Not necessarily, of course not. But it's just a weird little mystical thing, and college football has weird mystical stuff that sometimes happens. So, like I said, even just if someone were an unbiased, objective viewer of college sports, I think Arizona would be a team that's like, I don't know what they're going to do. Curious to see how that works out.
All right, so moving down, the next team on the media poll was Iowa State. This is a team that, I've had a little soft spot for, back to the Troy Davis 2,000-yard season days, but you would usually have a pretty good run game, but we're always, a 2-win team. But ever since Matt Campbell got there, he's made them into, a pretty consistent program. Had a couple years where they're, in the conference title race. I believe made one Big 12 title game, but last year was kind of a reload year, but a very successful year because I think they found some key pieces. Obviously, I think they have one of the best defenses in the conference. They're returning 18 total starters, but quarterback Rocco Becht, I think, is on the verge of stardom. I got a chance to kind of watch him a couple times last year, and really kind of impressive for a young quarterback. And I think if he can take that next step, this could be a team that could legitimately be very much in the conference race, perhaps one of those dark horses. A really good running back in Abu Sama, very explosive player. But, when Matt Campbell, I've been very impressed with him. And, this is not, maybe a team that's coming in with some of the expectations of the Brock Purdy years. But I think the pieces are in place, and a good, if something falls the right way or two, this could be a team that could be making their way to the conference title game.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting, 4 to 5 years for Iowa State. You go back to that COVID year, they played a full season. They had 12 games and won the Fiesta Bowl with Brock Purdy. And Campbell is a young coach. I mean, again, we talked about how I'm surprised that Leipold, is able to stay at Kansas, or Kansas is able to keep him there. Campbell was that name that he was coming up for, like USC. His name was being thrown out there for a lot of high-profile coaching jobs, especially around that maybe 2021, 2022 time period. It's just been kind of hit or miss in the last few seasons since that. The 9-3 in 2020, then they were 7-6, then 4-8, then 7-6 again. So, as you mentioned, they got a lot of starters coming back. So the expectation, and obviously as evidenced by where they're at in the pecking order of the conference, certainly would create the expectation that they'll build on that 7-win season. Let's just see if they can get that, consistency together. And, they had that a little bit before that COVID season. They had, from 2017 to 2019, they had 8-7 wins. So, some consistency there, some kind of slightly older days ASU win-loss records. The 6, 7, 8 wins is right in the wheelhouse of what the Devils were doing up until the last couple of years. So yeah, so this can be just, again, an interesting thing, because that was a program and a coach that was on a meteoric rise for a hot minute there. That got cooled off, but that's not to say that they're not capable of shaking things up. So we'll see what they do this year.
Yeah, there were some questions, the last couple of years of whether Matt Campbell had missed his window in terms of, making that jump up to a bigger program. But, if Rocco Becht and some of the other pieces can really level up, I mean, he might be back on that trajectory again this season. Now, moving on to number 7, and actually just kind of noticing the official media poll and my poll are in lockstep 1 through 7. West Virginia. I mean, this is this time a year ago, Neil Brown was on the hottest of seats, but really kind of turned things around, and West Virginia was one of the most surprising teams in the country a season ago. Good quarterback play from Garrett Green, a guy who's a dual threat, but this is a team that, just kind of like the Mountaineer teams of old, is really going to make their hay on the run game. Really good running back tandem, Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson. I think some questions up front and obviously on the defensive side of things, but I think they have, having that offensive backfield in place and, having some positive momentum, and, we'll see how they handle, some more positive expectations, kind of 180 from a season ago. But Mountaineers, Ray Anderson might not want to go to Morgantown, but some other teams might not want to go either because they could be a pretty strong team this year.
Yeah, it's been an interesting tenure for West Virginia in the Big 12 Conference. This is their 13th season in the Big 12, but since joining prior to the 2012 season, there are only 4 seasons they've had with 8 or more wins, and that was something they were doing with regularity out there in the good old Big East. But one of those seasons is last season, and that's the second best year that the West Virginia has had as a member of the Big 12, other than going 10-3 in 2016. So on the heels of that 9-4 record, we'll see what they can do this year. The few seasons before that, Not much to really write home about. In 5 wins in 2022, 6-7 in 21, 6-4 in 20, 5-7 in 19. So just hovering around that 5-6 win mark for a good period of time. So, kind of similar to what we've addressed with other teams. We'll see if that last year was a fluke or if that could be maintained.
All right, so now we get to number 8, UCF. So obviously one of the 4 teams that joined the Big 12 season ago made the jump up from the group of 5, and all 4 of the teams, as we'll get to, had some struggles and really kind of making that jump up to Power 5 level football. Tested their depth, and their record in close games, I think, were kind of reflected it. They were a team that many times got off to a fast start in games, but ultimately just couldn't finish things out. But they do have some very exciting big play ability. At their new quarterback, KJ Jefferson, it was had some great success as Arkansas starter. And Gus Malzahn's been talking about he's the closest thing to Cam Newton he's had since that magical run so many years ago. So we'll see. I mean, that's a hell of an expectation to put on, but he's got a lot of excellent playmakers around him. Running back R.J. Harvey is one of the best in the conference. Kobe Hudson at wide receiver is a big play waiting to happen every time. They brought in Penny Boone, one of the best running backs from the group of 5. So they got some loaded weapons. But again, how much better is their depth going to be now that they're heading into that second year as a Power 4 team? Is that depth any better, and is that close game luck going to swing? If not totally bad like it was a year ago, at least moderate a little bit.
Yeah, they were 6-7 a year ago. They're actually the only team among those new Big 12 members of last year to be bowl eligible. This could be a sneaky team this year and especially beyond. They had one of the best transfer classes in the country. Colorado, ASU, and UCF, I think, are all in like the top 5, top 6 as far as their transfer classes. Of course, from this past off season, they're also recruiting very well, for the future. So I think that this is a program that could get a little spark going on. Not sure what we'll get this year, but they could be a contender before it's all said and done. But if the stars align, they could make a run. They could play spoilers. So, it's a team that, I think that the fact that they're plotted right there in the middle of the conference kind of shows you that people don't really know what to make of them. You think that they'll probably be at worst a 500-ish team, maybe like last year, but maybe they could surprise folks as well. It wouldn't shock me if they're a team that's doing maybe a little bit better when things are all said and done than folks might have expected. I mean, Jefferson, during his time at Arkansas, they had some up and down times, but there were some ups there. He's a talented player, so that's a plug-and-play guy that's just got a lot of experience at the college level. Not a perfect athlete by any means, but someone that can pop in and maybe take him to some heights. So this is one that I know I've said the same thing because they're just with dang near every team in the conference, there's like, okay, they could do this, or they could do this. But UCF is a team that I think, I don't know, they might be able to surprise some people. I think that they could be all right this year. And again, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to compete for the conference crown, but they might finish a little higher than this preseason projection.
All those pieces stay healthy could make for a very interesting test for ASU's defense when they come to Mountain America Stadium later on this season. Moving down to number 9, kind of the back half now of the conference per the media poll. Number 9, Texas Tech. And I think there's almost kind of an inverse of West Virginia. I mean, the Red Raiders came into last year, whole lot of momentum, a whole lot of expectations, and really kind of stumbled out of the gate early. They did finish strong, so there's some momentum there, but it's going to be interesting kind of how those expectations play out now that they're coming in maybe a little bit under the radar. Just like a few of these teams, they have an excellent running back leading the way in Taj Brooks, one of the best in the country, and especially the conference as well. The passing game, I think, is going to be ultimately where they have a lot of questions. Baron Morton's their quarterback, and I've really not sure about what he's going to be able to do heading into 2024, but he will have the benefit of the program's first ever 5-star signee, wide receiver Micah Hudson. At Media Day, Joey McGuire made no bones about it that this is a guy that they're going to feed early and often despite being a true freshman. He has the makings of being one of the elite. I think there's like about a trio of these really high-level freshman wide receivers. So if that passing game could get going along with Taj Brooks is able to pick up where he left off a season ago, this could be a team that overperforms their preseason poll ranking.
It still is weird to hear about quarterback concerns in Texas Tech because, those of us who came up watching Texas Tech under the great late Mike Leach, quarterback was never the problem. So that'll be an interesting thing. They've been at that 7-8 win mark each of the last 3 seasons. So a bowl eligible team. That's after multiple consecutive seasons of losing records. The whole Cliff Kingsbury get fired from Texas Tech and then go get hired from hired by the Arizona Cardinals thing. Interesting way to have some career projection there. Yeah, and then obviously they got Jalen Conyers in there. We'll see how he factors into the mix of things with that offense. So again, it sounds like an arbitrary boilerplate thing, but they are a similar team, to the likes of UCF, to the likes of Iowa State, to the likes of West Virginia, where you probably peg them somewhere in that 6 to 8 win mark, unless something either goes particularly good or particularly bad.
Number 10, TCU, and the struggles last year were entirely expected. After their magical run to the national championship game and the Hypno-Toad and all the fun that folks were having there, but they lost just about everyone, which made their loss to Colorado, and everybody was hyping up that Colorado beat TCU. I think there was a little, obviously smoke and mirrors, because that was not the Horned Frogs team that that people saw a season ago. They were pretty pedestrian last year. Nothing too terrible, but they certainly were a far cry from what they were. They're bringing in a new defensive coordinator, familiar name, former Boise State head coach Andy Avalos. I think they have some big-time questions along both of the lines, and they really need some development from quarterback Josh Hoover. But this is a team that still has some pretty good talent there. Sonny Dykes is a very good ball coach. So I think that this is a team that obviously is, I think, a fair bit from making a run at the conference title, but should definitely be in that contention for making the postseason.
And if you look at their win totals over the last 5 years, that is just one of the oddest single season spikes that I think I've ever seen. Just looking at any chunk of time with any team in their win-loss records. I mean, you take it back to 2019, you get 5 wins, then 6 in 2020, and they played 10 games. 5 wins in 2021, then 13-2. And then 5 wins. It's just such a crazy spike to go from 5 to 13 back down to 5. And like you said, I mean, it was expected for them to struggle. I don't know if a losing season, a 5-7 season was the expectation. I mean, they still were in the preseason last year, ranked 17th. So some folks thought they were going to, win maybe 8, 9, 10 games, which obviously didn't happen. So this is a weird one to predict. Like you said, Dykes is a very talented coach. He's been there before, an offensive guru. But they just got to get it done. It just didn't happen last year. So the bounce back is going to be, very, very important, because this is just his 3rd season. Of course, you got to keep in mind that 13-win season, that national championship game appearance, that was Sonny Dykes' 1st year there. So we will see what year 3 has in store for them to just to get a litmus test, to get a pulse of this program and what they're capable of. Because again, at this time last year, when we're talking about ASU joining the Big 12, of course, again, there were expectations that TCU would, have a drop off last season, but we were still thinking, okay, ASU is going to be in a conference with a power team in TCU. So eager to see what they're all about. Again, common story here. It's just the rapid fire parity that is likely to occur in this league. Is this a team that is a bona fide, high level win team? And it's happened before. I mean, if you were to just take a look online at their win totals, they've had 11 and 12 win seasons that were surrounded by 4, 5, 6 win seasons. So this is kind of an erratic program under a multitude of coaches, although of course Gary Patterson was around since the dawn of man before he left. So just kind of an odd program there. I do love me some Fort Worth, that's for dang sure. So it's gonna be my favorite city in the Big 12 once ASU gets to play there. But don't know what to make of them, and as is evidenced, of course, by the voters, they're probably treading very lightly on their expectations of TCU if they're going to be in the bottom 3rd or so in the league in this preseason poll.
Who's not buying the Colorado hype? Big 12 media. The Buffaloes are number 11 in this preseason poll, and of course, let the discourse begin. Obviously, they have some legitimate studs and some very good players in certain areas. But how much of the hype is warranted? Joe, this is another year where they just really kind of just revamped the roster. 40 more players brought in through the portal. And I found this stat to be pretty interesting. Now, obviously, they had a almost complete overhaul from last season. 71 scholarship players that were signed by Colorado last year. 61% of those guys are no longer there, one and done. So it's obviously the questions about how Dion is building this program persist. Were awful on defense a season ago, just hideous in terms of the run game as well. One of the worst rushing teams in the country, even though they had great success with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter making some plays on offense. And, Hunter is also an elite defensive back in his own right. But I just have a hard time, believing that this is a team that is still having to revamp the roster yet again and having to try to find in more questions to their trench issues that going into a conference, with the likes of Utah and Kansas State and just, so many teams that are established and more physical that they're going to have. I mean, I think they'll be better than last year, but I don't see this as a team that's warranting the hype. And, EA Sports has them ranked as one of the, elite teams in the country. I mean, I think this is a team that may contend for a bowl, but I'm not seeing them making a run at 8, 9, 10 wins.
Yeah, I am not a believer. I'll say that again. I am not a believer. If Deion Sanders wants to, do his little shtick again and call people out in the press conference, then I'll join in that group of folks that does not believe. You mentioned the overhaul, and that's not limited to the player personnel. I think they had about half their coaching staff turn over. And I believe that most, if not all of those departures were those highly tenured, experienced former head coaches that were on the staff. Sean Lewis is gone. Brewster, they're ones that are, gone from this program. I think that obviously last year it started off like gangbusters going 3-0, then they won one game the rest of the time. So there was that heavy, just unbearable momentum and national drooling over this program that came back down to earth.
We don't need to talk about that one team that they beat.
Yeah, right. So
one blown coverage away from, dropping the last 9.
Exactly. And so if they get off to a slow start this year, because I think that there are a lot of people nationally who, learned a lesson from the hype train that Colorado was placed on last year. And I know it's a mixed bag. There's some people that are high on them, some that aren't, but I think it's more of a mixed bag than it was last year. And if they get off to a rocky start, that could just create a lot of discourse against them. And just given the visibility of this program and the way that it's just such a circus clown show, I think more than other programs, the outside noise seeps in. I mean, you see stuff about, I saw some quote from Shedeur Sanders saying that something to the effect of, we know that everybody thinks of us as their Super Bowl. Are you kidding me? They won 4 games last year. They blew, a 29-point lead against Stanford? Was that the number? Something to that effect?
I saw a really funny tweet, like somebody who quote tweeted that and well, congratulations to Stanford, Wazoo, Arizona, and all those teams on their recent Super Bowl victories.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's a lot. It's too much. It's the Hollywood glitz and glamour that, some people are into, and that's cool. Seriously, if you're into it, then by all means, more power to you. This is America, you can do that. But it's perfectly okay for people not to be into that. And that's the thing where it got kind of caught up in a lot of debates, especially on social media last year, is just, people kind of being attacked for dude, I don't care for the glitz and the glamour. That's not for me. Maybe it is, very largely for college athletes. And so I get the appeal, but it's just not a universal appeal. So it's going to be real interesting to see what happens this year. I'm right there along. You don't see the culture of camaraderie there. You just don't see a culture that makes you think that, okay, they just rebuilt their roster again for the second straight year. Had a lot of guys who came in under Deion Sanders last year that chose to leave. Guys like Mateer, who's a tight end at ASU now, who came in for a cup of coffee and left. From the outside looking in, you just see all of these chaotic issues that don't give you a bunch of confidence that they're going to be able to take, a handful of new coaches and a mess of new players, bundle that all together, and double their win total from last year. And then again, I'm eager to see what happens beyond this season, because Sanders is very likely going to be off the NFL. I think that just Shedeur Sanders. And then I'm very curious what's going to be the case when Deion Sanders has no more of his spawn playing for the program. Is that going to keep him there? So it's going to be just like last year. They're going to be a lot of eyes on this program. Now, then if they go out and win a bunch of games, prove people wrong, there's obviously going to be a lot of talk coming from them, and then that'll have been backed up. So there's nothing anybody can do to shut that up. So they do have a high-powered offense. There's no doubt about that. They're going to put up some points and some yards. They do have to replace some key players in the offense, of course. And as you mentioned, the run game was absolutely non-existent, and they lost those running backs. Now I believe they got a pretty solid transfer from Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken. So again, it's I'm not saying it's white knuckle time, but just that was a unique roller coaster ride from all of the hype of the preseason, that 3-0 start, and then just falling off a cliff, and where that's put them now. So yeah, as you mentioned, they're in the bottom chunk of this this prediction. I think they'll be hard pressed to be bowl eligible. 4 or 5 wins, I think, sounds about right for them.
I think there's going to be a lot of fans across the country rooting for North Dakota State. I don't know if that's the opener, but they got Colorado early, and that's, never count out NDSU in terms of in their resume of knocking off FBS and Power 5, Power 4 teams as well. So Joe, so you're saying that when you get the new EA Sports game, you're not going to do the Shador, like show, what are they, the show the ice celebration that's in the game, that's like one of the custom animations?
I'm going to create myself. I'm going to put it on the easiest mode possible. I don't know. Can you turn penalties off? Can you do it like you used to, back in other video games?
Perfect mode.
Yeah, we're going to do perfect mode. We gotta, it's not been easy for the Devils. It's not been fun the last couple of years. You got to get some of that out there. But yeah, that, needless to say, although I still rock the PlayStation 3, I basically use it as like an old DVD player for stuff I still have kicking around. So either going to have to upgrade, or I don't know, can we get an NIL deal with EA Sports and get get some freebies? That'd be pretty tight. So yeah. Like I said, it's just I'm not a flashy dude. I'm not into flash. If you back it up, then you can, and that's kind of like the old Miami days, of the U. But if you talk a lot and continue to talk, and Sanders saying stuff like what was the expectations are different, or whatever the line was that he had. I don't know
like
if
your wins are kind of, like my wins are kind of different than your wins, which I get the context that he's going for, and I agree to an extent that I don't think Dion meant it, just because of the narrative and how people are looking at the program through a lens that I think Dion is definitely not. Because I do think that there might be a different-ish or different adjacent standard, but yeah, it's just it's so much for so little actual tangible results to this point.
If what he was going for is like, I'm under a microscope and I'm viewed differently, I'm scrutinized differently than pretty much every other coach in the country, if that's the general gist of it, I'll agree with that wholeheartedly, but I'll also add and agree with the fact that he put himself in that position. And that's it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do the flash thing, if you're going to do the Coach Prime thing, if you're going to do all the Rolexes and sunglasses and rappers and celebrities on the sidelines, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but when you draw your attention to yourself in the program in that way, and that's the angle that you take, then yes, you're going to get a different level of scrutiny, a different level of observation. They've gotten a lot of support from casual fans, so it's not all all for naught. But yeah, when you go out and do that kind of stuff, I mean, that does put a target on you, and that's not a new thing. I mean, that's how he was as an athlete. You think about Deion Sanders was a kind of divisive athlete. He had people that loved him and people that really didn't love him. So that's nothing new to him. He shouldn't be surprised by it at any point. I'm sure he's been dealing with this stuff for more than 30 years, going back to his college days in Florida State. So it'll be the script will come to fruition in some form or fashion. I just see this as a boom or bust team. I think either they're going to stay in that sub 500 range, or they're going to do something well beyond that. And I think that in this year, because there were obviously a lot of folks that were saying, hey, they went from 1 win to 4. That's really good. And on a 30,000 foot plane, yes, that is good. But when you get 3 of those 4 wins in the first 3 games, that's not good. Last year was not a successful season for Colorado. You cannot call it that. Was it better than the previous? Yes. Was it successul? No.
And look at those 3 wins, and those opening 3 wins. Like you had the husk of TCU, Nebraska, which was a bad team last year, and then Colorado State. You had to go into double, triple overtime or something like that. You had to hold on, bare knuckle it just to get a win over your in-state rival. So I think
they got a little lucky there for sure. So
and then beating a 3-win ASU team for your 4th win.
Yeah. So it's. For it not to be a disappointing season, they got to get to bowl eligibility for sure. I think at this point, especially with what's on the line, because you're probably going to lose a lot of your key players after this year. And again, you never say never in coaching. And look at baseball. Look at the coach at Texas A&M and the things that he said before he flipped to Texas. A day or two later. Depending on how things go for Colorado this year, if they go out and win 3 or 4 games this year, I'm really curious, or no matter what they do, as a matter of fact, whether they win the national championship or if they go 0-12, curious to see how things are 1 year from today for the Colorado Buffaloes.
All right, so through the 11 spots so far in the media poll, I'm in lockstep with on my ballot, except I had Texas Tech and UCF flipped. I had Colorado 11th. This is where we start to disappear or diverge a little bit. I did not have Baylor 12th, but on the aggregate they did. This is a team that was coming off a disastrous 2023 season. Dave Aranda's on one of the hottest seats in the country, and he's, I believe, kind of one of those moves where sometimes you see a coach that is on the hot seat. They really kind of, take the reins on that side of the ball that they made their name. So he's taken over the defensive play calling duties for the Bears this season. They have a new offensive coordinator in Jake Spavital, who obviously has put up to some good offenses throughout his time in the sport. And that offense was pretty bad a season ago. They brought in the MAC Player of the Year, DeQuan Finn, dual threat quarterback. But this is going to be real interesting. I think it's real make or break pressure time in Waco.
Yeah, like looking at, I mentioned, I think from a previous team about how they have such a weird spike, or TCU kind of having that crazy spike, I believe it was. God, you look at the recent pass for Baylor, and that's odd. I mean, in the last, the previous 7 seasons, they've had 3 seasons of 3 or fewer wins, but then they also have an 11-win season and a 12-win season. Like, this is nuts. I think it's just maybe strange from the perspective of, a follower of Sun Devil football, which, prior to the last 2 seasons, it was like clockwork, 6 to 8 wins, 6 to 8 wins, 6 to 8 wins, a couple deviations here and there. So to see these crazy spikes, it's a noticeable thing. So, but like you said there, it's been a steady drop off these last 3 years. They went from 12 wins in 2021 to 6 in 2022 to 3 in 2023. So I guess that they're going to win 1.5 games this year if they're cutting everything in half year over year. I don't know how they're going to do that, but somehow they're going to go 1.5 and 11.5, right? So yeah, there's a lot to figure out there. Aranda was someone that came in with super high expectations, and that he that second season after the COVID year, they won 2 games in a 9-game COVID year, but then they won 12 games and Sugar Bowl win, finished in the top 10 that second season. So yeah, like you said, hot seat. We'll see what comes of it.
Number 13, BYU. And speaking of former Baylor quarterbacks, Jerry Bohannon is now in Provo because that offense for BYU a season ago, again, you mentioned kind of with UCF, those new teams that made the jump up to the Big 12 from the group of 5 all had some struggles, and BYU's offense really had a hard time of it. Jake Retzlaff also joining the quarterback room, so they got a quarterback battle there. The defense,
you got another quarterback as well with a familiar last name.
Yeah, one of the
Tracy Bourget in there. So they've got some guys, yeah. And
I believe in spring I saw something like they had like 8 scholarship, 10 total quarterbacks. They were bringing they're looking for answers on the offensive side of the ball, and on defense they also struggled. That's one area where BYU has historically been pretty good, but they had some struggles. Not to the extent of the offense a season ago, but they weren't at what we've seen from BYU in recent years. But this is the second year under defensive coordinator Jay Hill, so maybe they'll be some improvement there, but I still think this is a team that's got a ways to go to become a Big 12 contender.
Yeah, they're an interesting one because especially in like prior to last season, the handful of years before that, under Satake, they kind of had like that. I mean, they will not want to hear me say this, so maybe I'll catch some hell if some BYU fans hear this from me. But like a Utah light, as far as just consistent, they were consistent on that like 7-8 win, and they had back-to-back double-digit win seasons in 20 and 21. Obviously ASU, played them that time out there in Provo in that frustrating game. So again, that was a program that I thought would be, when I heard of ASU going to the Big 12, that this would be maybe certainly an upper half team of the Big 12, but that's not looking like the case. But yet again, this is one that we will see if we're taking that, Utah light aspect of things. Can they bounce back? It was their first losing season since 2017 was last year. So we'll see again what they do, but also it was their first year in the Big 12. Is that upgrade a big step for them? Again, use that Utah comparison. You think back to when they joined the Pac-12 in 2011. It took them a good 2, 3, 4 years to really get their footing. I remember we were having preseason conversations. It was probably somewhere around maybe 13 or 14 of like, is Utah cut out for the Pac-12? Are they going to be a lower tier team because they had consecutive losing seasons after great success in a previous conference? So this would be a pivotal year for BYU as well to figure if this jump to the Big 12 is a little bit more than they can chew.
Number 14, Cincinnati. Some big time questions across the board. None more pressing than the health status of the star defensive tackle Dante Corleone. He had some blood clots in his lungs. His coach Satterfield at Media Day said that he's progressing well, starting to work out a little bit, but he is one of the very best interior D linemen in this conference. So hopefully he's able to get back here pretty soon. But there's reasons for optimism that they have a 1,000-yard back in Corey Kiner. The entire offensive line is returning. Xavier Henderson is a nice wide receiver, but the quarterback play was atrocious last year. So they went in the portal and brought over Brendan Sorsby from Indiana. Nice 15 touchdown, 5 pick ratio there, but they're going to need a lot better quarterback play. And just I think that they're one of those teams that really kind of struggled the season ago making that jump up. So I don't, I believe they had a number. Emory Jones, former ASU and Florida quarterback, started the season for them as well. Did not have really a good success after the first couple of tune-up games. So I think they have some big time questions, and they're a ways off.
Yeah. So for any Sun Devil fans who might have been crying over spilled milk that Emory Jones left the program last year, so they went 3-8, won one conference game. So I'm not sure that he started every single game, but he was their main guy, and the output was exactly the same that ASU did. It's been a interesting time there, for Cincinnati. As far as Luke Fickell leaving after some high success and playoff appearances, top 10 teams. Satterfield in his first year, and then that's a coach that's had some success elsewhere as well. That 3-win level, that's not going to get it done. I mean, goodness gracious, I'm looking through things, and that's their lowest win total since 1999. So that's they're kind of in a similar boat, I guess you could say, maybe as ASU was like last year. As far as that major drop off, from a solid season to a 3-win season. But like you said, there's a lot of work to be done, so it makes perfect sense that they're going to be included in that bottom few teams.
And the hiring of Coach Satterfield was one that was kind of met with, especially coming off the success that Fickell had there. That hire drew some questions from the Bearcat faithful. So not a great debut. We'll see if they can rebound a little bit. But that's one of ASU's road games this year. So we'll be heading out to Cincinnati, maybe try that Skyline Chili. But rounding out things, number 15, the team that's directly ahead of ASU in the media poll, Houston, which is going to have a new head coach in Willie Fritz, a guy who I really, really like as head coach, but man, he's got his work cut out for him. They lost a lot after Dana Holgerson departed there. 25 new transfers. They are going to be, I think, a few years out. This is going to be a significant rebuild job. They have a good quarterback in Donovan Smith. Very talented guy there, but I think that this is a team, that not an ASU schedule this season, but this is going to be a team that I think has got some bright days ahead because I really like Willie Fritz, and having him have a chance now at a power institution is going to be cool, and a school that's pretty well resourced in Houston. But I think this is going to be a team that's going to be their competitive days are probably a couple years away.
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple with it. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense that they're, on the outside looking in terms of the teams that are being considered for not just high-level competition and conference championship competition, but even ones that are going to be, bowl caliber teams. Just the process of elimination based on what happened last year, coaching change, the move to a new conference. I mean, again, you can tell there's a theme between teams like Houston, Cincinnati, BYU. It's what they have in common, not just that they were the last 3 teams that we've discussed here, rounding out near the bottom of the preseason predictions. They were all new to the Big 12 last year. It's an adjustment for a team to come from a essentially lower conference and work their way into a power conference. Just seems like that happens. So Not the end of the world, not a massively shocking thing, but you get the impression it's going to take a little bit more time.
All right, so of course that leaves Arizona State rounding out the official aggregate media poll at number 16. On my ballot, I had ASU 12th. I had them directly ahead of Baylor, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati. Joe, where would you put ASU? Now, obviously, we'll go much more in depth in the weeks to come, especially, and give our final predictions in our season preview. But ASU, the aggregate media says 16th, dead last. I think 12. Where do you think that a fair preseason ranking is for the Devils?
Certainly wouldn't have gone dead last. Yeah, I would say probably somewhere in that 12 to 13 range, because you're really, just that chunk, that 5-team chunk of Colorado, Houston, ASU, Baylor, Cincinnati. I think there's some kind of, or even BYU as well. You could throw them in that mix, even though they won 5 games, so they're a little bit better than the others last year. So, you really have that 5 to 6 team chunk that could be sorted out in a lot of different ways. So, yeah, I'd say probably somewhere in that 12 to 13, maybe 14 range, but definitely not at the very bottom. If I just had to guess, probably. Folks might point to outside of Scadaboo, a lack of proven offensive skill talent, with the departure of Elijah Badger, with, quarterbacks that, though there's some intrigue around here that people on a large scale just may not know much about. And defensively, even though there's, intrigue based on the newcomers, you don't have that. If someone were to look at like an all-conference list from last year or stats from last year, and you see, okay, you lose Elijah Badger, you lose, BJ Green, you lose these players that you're high performers, then what are you going to do? So on the outside looking in, I'm not saying I understand it, but I could probably easily point to the things that folks are looking at as far as what concerns them. Again, it'll remain a conversation for another time as far as what I and what both of us think ASU will do record-wise, but for them to be at the absolute very bottom after the last 2 years and going into a new conference, I can kind of understand why voters would lean that way as like a knee-jerk reaction or as just kind of like a, arbitrary pick. I don't think they're going to end up there.
Yeah, we'll dive into ASU much more detail, but I do think that, that people from, the rest of the conference, they're just not familiar with ASU. They see 3 wins. They see Jaden Rashada and Elijah Badger leaving, and not necessarily what was already here or was left here and what was augmented. And so, I do think ASU is in a good position to surprise those expectations, and not just in a not finished dead last type of way, like an actual okay, this is a team that's a quality addition to this conference. Joe, let's round things out with some of the preseason awards and Big 12 team that were announced as well. As part of the official aggregate, they had the Offensive Player of the Year as running back Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. On my ballot, I had Ted McMillan of U of A. I think he's going to have a huge, huge year. Who would be your Offensive Player of the Year preseason pick?
So I'll default to Gordon. I mean, especially in the preseason, he's the returning Doak Walker winner, ran for over 1,700 yards, over 20 touchdowns. A team that should be pretty solid, but has some quarterback questions, some talented receivers, some experience at quarterback. So they'll lean upon him. And obviously we mentioned they'll be doing that a lot early. So I think the numbers should be there. These sort of awards, I think that just the low-hanging fruit is always going to be either quarterback or running back just because of the touches. But if, McMillan, if a receiver is going to do it, it would be him. I think just the safe pick is Gordon. Now, will it be him? Is it easy to be him? Certainly not.
All right, Defensive Player of the Year, perhaps no surprise, cornerback Travis Hunter. On my ballot, I actually had linebacker Nick Martin of Oklahoma State. They have a pair of really, really good linebackers. I think that Hunter might see the bulk of his impact on the offensive side, so I went with Martin there.
So I again defaulted to Hunter for some different reasons. If he can stay healthy, he's a very talented player. He's a flashy player. But I think there's really something to be said just for the immense spotlight that's on him. There aren't a lot of household names really across the board in the Big 12. A guy like Gordon is, but even some of the quarterbacks, a lot of the talented running backs that ran for 1,200 plus yards. The Oklahoma State had a receiver that caught over 100 passes last year. Just not a lot of household names. a lot of the biggest household names are being brought into the conference from outside, whether it's Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Cam Rising, Fafita, McMillan. These are guys that are fairly known commodities. And I know that that's easy to say for people like myself, people like us who have seen these guys play for several years and have just been around it. But I think that that's the case. So when you have someone who's very highly visible, should be a top 3 to 5 pick in the draft next year, as long as things work out. I think the mixture of his talent and visibility, there are a lot of people that have questions about Deion Sanders, and there are probably a lot of people in the media that have mixed views on Deion Sanders, but I don't know that they necessarily, and they may even hold that against Shedeur Sanders, but I don't think people hold that against Travis Hunter. I don't think that he has the same kind of questionable, maybe, I don't want to say reputation, but I just don't think that he's as divisive. I think that he's someone that a lot of people appreciate and respect. So you put it all together, I think the on the field and off the field can help him get over the finish line in that one.
All right. And it is also kind of a bummer, Joe, that we're not picking the Pat Tillman Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year anymore. So just kind of the more generic titles here in the Big 12. The final of the 3 preseason awards that they handed out, newcomer of the year, and this wasn't just any freshman. This is anybody new to the conference because the media selected quarterback KJ Jefferson, as we mentioned, playing at UCF. For me, I doubled down. I went Tet McMillan again.
So that's what I have a question about, because is it new to the conference, meaning this is the first year with the team being in the conference? Because I can't imagine, just food for thought, I can't imagine that if returning players for new conference teams, so, a guy like McMillan, if they were eligible, why in the world Jefferson would have been the preseason pick over a guy like McMillan, over a guy like Fafita, over a guy like Cam Rising and some others? I'm not saying to make a different pick. I just don't understand the rules. So if I'm going to lean toward the thought process that it's either a true or redshirt freshman, junior college transfer, or an incoming transfer, I'm going to be very lame and go 3 for 3 and side with Jefferson, because I think relatively highly of him. I think UCF could surprise some people. Again, if I'm operating under that thought process that guys like McMillan, Fafita, Cam Rising, and anybody on ASU, Cam Scattaboo for that matter, they're not eligible for it. If I'm operating on that, because again, I don't understand why the media, that would be a big blunder on their part if they would pick KJ Jefferson over McMillan and many others. I'll go
quarterback bias. Yeah, a guy who got some SEC notoriety, perhaps.
Perhaps. I'll side with them. I'll toe the company line on all 3.
All right. So before we go into and close out with our national picks, no Sun Devil made the All Pac-12 there we go. We have a little swear jar system or something for Pac-12 mentions. No Sun Devil made the All Big 12 preseason team. I will say I do appreciate the conference, because on the ballot that we had to fill out, there is a dedicated fullback spot. And my pick was the one that also made it. And this is just a fullback as hell name right here, Steve-O Klotz of Iowa State. So good for Steve-O Klotz there. All right, Joe, do you think which Sun Devil do you think should have had, or maybe had the best case, or were closest to, consideration for the all preseason, or the preseason All Big 12?
I mean, if you're going through the list, the 2 players that could stand out would be like a Shamari Simmons or a Cam Scattaboo. This is a conference that's loaded with running backs, so it makes sense if for Cam not to be on there. Simmons is a possibility. Maybe he's one of the bigger snubs. I think that just a lot of the others that folks might say are people that still need to put it together. Maybe, and in that previous statement, I'd throw a guy like Lee Faltano in there. What am I saying? Like, I'm saying that at the end of the year, Jordan Tyson could be a known commodity. Or guy Ben Coleman could be a known commodity. You could have Clayton Smith, Prince Dorba, the linebackers. You could have Xavier Alford. You could have a lot of guys that are known commodities by the end of the season, and there's reason why we've talked about a lot of these players very optimistically over the course of the last several months. But they have to go out there and prove it. That's someone that if media or whomever's voting on these teams look back and they say, okay, well, that guy didn't play last year. or that guy, has been a part-time player, or whatever the case may be. If they're looking at it not only objectively, but looking at it without the experience of having really watched these players much at all, which is probably the case for the majority of them, maybe minus, the ones that cover the former Pac-12 teams. I can understand why there's some trepidation on selecting ASU players. So again, it doesn't particularly shock me if you take away the options of guys like Scadaboo, Simmons, and maybe Fautanu as well. Otherwise, like I said, there are guys that can be very deserving by the time the season's done, but they just all have that little footnote on them that either they missed time due to injury last year, so they're not as much on the radar, or they're just in that spot where they could leap into a very good year, but they just have to put it out there to convince everybody.
I had 2 Sun Devils on my ballot, and you mentioned one of them, Shamari Simmons. That was a coin toss, though. I think Alford or Simmons, one of them is going to make, or probably maybe both. But I think those are guys that are in very much consideration. I also had Clayton Smith on the D-line. The closest the Sun Devils did come to having a player on there was a former Sun Devil. B.J. Green made the squad, and Dion said on Wednesday at Media Day that he feels that B.J. Green has first-round potential, and he said something to the effect of like they treated him well at ASU, or they got him ready, or something to that effect, like making it sound like ASU is kind of like the AAA squad for the Buffaloes. Also, I did have on my ballot the all-conference place kicker, Carter Brown, familiar name. He had a good season for Cincinnati a season ago. Joe, let's close things out before we talk to Demarius Robinson with some of our national picks. We're not going to do the full 12-team playoff field, but who are your Power 4 conference champs and the G6 representative to get that probably the 12th playoff spot?
Oh, goodness. Oh, my goodness. Okay. I'm going to have to...
I can start if you...
Go for it. Yeah, I got my 4. I can put it together. I don't mind doing things on the spot, but yeah, won't you lead it off?
All right. So there's gonna be some chalk here. Big Ten, Ohio State. Spoiler alert: I think they win the whole thing this year. It's gonna be. I think they're so loaded to that if they don't, it's gonna be weird. Georgia, I think, comes out of the SEC. I think Bama's gonna be good, but I think Georgia is in line to take that one. As mentioned, I think Utah wins the conference. I think they beat K-State in the conference title game, so Utes are heading to the playoff. And Florida State, I mean, they lost a lot, but I still think they're really well positioned. DJ Uiagalelei taking the reins there. Mike Norvell has really made Tallahassee's a great spot for development and what they've been able to do with impact transfers and the recruiting. And my G6 representative, I think Memphis. They had a really good season last year, and I think that they have a lot of key pieces coming back. So I think that they're in line to take home the token G6 playoff spot. Some dark horses, I think, to throw those out there. I think Miami's really good. I mean, they got some Pacific Northwest legacy Pac-12 ties there with Cam Ward as their quarterback, Damian Martinez at running back, and of course they're always talented. And I think Cristobal maybe gets out of his own way and doesn't cost the team just another win with his ridiculous calls. Oregon, I think, is going to be in that mix as well. And then I guess probably the biggest true dark horse, NC State, coming out of the ACC. But I do think Florida State wins that conference.
So I think I may agree. So yeah, I mentioned Utah is going to be my favorite for this. I think Ohio State, yeah, that's an easy pick now. Georgia, yeah, they bring back a lot, and they've got Alabama just has that coaching change. You don't know what's going to happen with them. LSU, whatever. You feel like Clemson, are they going to be kept down for an incredible amount of time? But Florida State, they still have quite a bit of talent for sure, and they did some things in the transfer portal, and probably have a chip on their shoulder, after what happened to them, or what didn't really happen to them, just what happened with them getting left out of the playoffs. So those, yeah, no, I can get on board with those. And screw it, I don't know anything about them other than the fact that they've been kind of good, and a good buddy of mine went to school there. I'm saying UTSA is going to be your G5 team.
Meep. Love it. Yeah. It's going to be interesting. They've done some good things. All right. So as we close it out, Joe, who's the Heisman this year? Which quarterback?
Right. I'm kind of going back and forth between Milroe and Beck, but I'll say Beck. Milroe is a talented guy. Carson, he's back for Georgia, right?
Yeah, he's my pick too.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I was going to say, yeah, it's because you look at even the top vote getters from last year. I think something like the top like 5, 6, like the big chunk. You don't have a lot of huge names coming back. At least ones that have been there and done it. So yeah, it's kind of a low hanging fruit thing, and those are probably the preseason odds are probably going to favor those two just because of the position they play and the teams they play for, and that they are talented. But I think Beck has been more consistent, and I think Georgia's going to be a better team, so he'll be in that spotlight.
Yeah, I think Beck takes it. I'll throw some dark horse love to my guy Grayson McCall now that he's at NC State. So if the NC State dark horse thing comes true and they make a run at the ACC, maybe get a playoff spot in one of the 9, 10, 11 area, sure, send him to New York. Get that mullet over there. That's going to be fun. All right, so that's our look at the Big 12 national picture. And as we mentioned, we'll be taking a much deeper dive throughout camp and, of course, ending with our season preview and prediction roundtable in a few weeks. As we close out this episode, here is a conversation with new ASU running back commit member of the 2025 class, Demarius Robinson. All right, so let's start off with the big question. Why was Arizona State the right place for you?
It felt something like home. Coach Aguano, Coach Dilly, you know what I'm saying? Like father figures, you know what I'm saying? I felt like when I got to Arizona, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, I knew everybody. We was all connected, and it's a great place to be around. Like everybody loving, caring, and you know what I'm saying, and stuff like that.
So when you were able to actually take the visit and kind of see things up close, meet these people face to face, see the facilities, and kind of go around, and I believe you're here like for the spring game. What were some of the things that made the deepest impression that helped ultimately kind of solidify that decision?
Just seeing the players out there having fun, a whole bunch of energy out there, and I really want to be a part of that, and you know what I'm saying, and be with them and go win some games with them guys with a whole bunch of energy.
When you got to see those players, talk with them, interact and such, what was your kind of read on the vibe and the culture of the program that Kenny Dillingham and staff are trying to put in here in Tempe?
Can you say it again?
When you got to meet these players kind of face to face, and what was your read on kind of the vibe and the team culture of the program?
They're cool to be around. You know what I'm saying? It's not really too much to say that they got cool, nice environment. You know what I'm saying? It look like they all get together, all family, just brotherhood over there. So I want to be a part of that for sure.
Are you ready for the desert heat out here, being an Oklahoma guy?
Yeah, it's hot out here right now. It's like 100 degrees right now.
Good. And so, when you got to get to know Kenny Dillingham, what were some of the things that jumped out to you? Obviously, one of the younger coaches in the country, but a guy who already in his young career has a pretty good track record of putting together some powerful offenses. Yeah,
he's a great coach, outgoing guy. He's willing to build relationships with his players and stuff like that. And I really just want to be a part of that. And want him to be my head coach. And I believe he's gonna make me a better player when I'm in college and when I get to the league in the future. So.
You mentioned Sean Aguano, a guy who, since he's been here at Arizona State, had some very successful, very productive running backs during those couple of years. What jumps out to him? You mentioned, is kind of a guy who has perhaps a father figure type of guy. What jumps out to him about as a developer of running backs and a guy who can develop you on and off the field?
Like I was saying, same thing about Coach Dilly. He just, believes in me a whole bunch. I can't say really too much about, other people, but him, Coach Aguano, definitely believes in me. He thinks I can, go compete, and as long as I got that chip on my shoulder, and he believes in me, I should be all right, and stuff like that. So Coach Aguano is a great coach, and I'd rather have him coaching me than anybody else. So.
What's your favorite part of playing running back?
Scoring touchdowns. Who don't want to score a touchdown? Everybody wants the ball. RBs get the ball. You know what I'm saying? I like scoring touchdowns, breaking 80, 70 yards.
And that's something that you did a lot. I mean, I believe 28 rushing scores a season ago. What's the most rewarding part? What's your favorite way to score a touchdown? Is it like, do you like running past people, juking guys, running people over? What obviously there's a lot of different ways to the end zone. What's your favorite way of getting there?
One, I don't like trucking, but I'll truck somebody if I have to. But my favorite is juking for sure, making people miss because they're gonna be on my highlight reel. Yeah. I like real. So making people miss, then that's pretty much it. Then celebrate with the O lineman because the O lineman did their thing up front. So
So any ASU fans who might not have seen your huddle film or seen you in action, give our viewers and listeners a scouting report. What kind of things and skills are you going to be bringing to the Sun Devil offense?
home run, like when the ball in my hands, expect something to happen for sure. You know what I'm saying? I can make people miss. Put me out receiver slot. I'm go catching, burn people down deep. It's really hard to guard me. You know what I'm saying? I got receiver footwork too, but most importantly that I'm a great leader for sure. I make sure all my guys, you know what I'm saying, make everybody around me better as well. So
Are there any backs that you model your game after, or try to maybe take different parts of different guys' games and make it your own?
Barry Sanders.
Oh, that's the best all-time back.
Barry Sanders, making people miss, breaking tackles. It's gonna take more than 3 people to tackle me. So
what kind of person and off the field is this Sun Devil program getting? Kenny Dillingham said that he wants to bring in a culture of guys that have a certain character to them. What kind of person is ASU getting?
Oh, they getting a laid back type dude. Don't go out, be on the game, love to work out. But always loving and care. If you need something, I'm willing to help. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, I don't party, don't do none of that. Just be chilling at the crib, playing the game, and always hard working for sure.
Now, I believe you had tremendous success this past season, but I believe as a sophomore, battled some injuries and going through that adversity. But before you had the success last year, going through those injuries and the hurdles that coming back from an injury presents. What kind of lessons did you learn from that experience?
Take care of my body. That's really much. I ain't take care of my body during the summer. That made me get that injury. So now I just got to take care of my body and be more aware of what I'm eating, drinking, make sure I'm stretching and stuff like that. So I can be preparing my body so it won't prevent injuries and stuff like that.
ASU has had a lot of success recruiting in Texas. They have they call it the Texas Tempe pipeline, but there's a certain type of guy that plays in Texas, and I've talked to a lot of them about their traits. What does an Oklahoma ball player have? What are some of the traits that football, playing football in Oklahoma instills into a player?
They always have a chip on their shoulder because we really got the best football. I say, you know what I'm saying. Everybody sleeping on us, but Oklahoma guys always got the chip on their shoulder. They're always willing to work hard, no matter who watching. Or, you know what I'm saying. They just willing to work hard and compete. For sure.
When you got to know this offensive scheme that Kenny Dillingham and offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo like to use, what really kind of jumps out to you about the scheme and how they like to use their running backs?
That I'm pretty sure I can play all around. So slot, I'll be everywhere to where I can get the ball in open space and between the tackles. So I'm pretty, do my thing and we should be good. Offensive scheme is great. So I just know I'm going to be great there. It fit me.
So, of course, ASU is moving from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, kind of, your neck of the woods there and, in that Texas, Oklahoma area. How much of a factor was that, knowing that, you're going to be playing a lot of games kind of, not too far from home?
It's good. My family can come watch me play. Pretty much it.
And so when you look ahead to this final season at the high school level, what are some of the goals that you have for yourself that you want to accomplish, but also some of the things that you want to do this fall to help prepare you for the jump up to major college football?
Be more vocal as a leader and, last thing, go win that state championship. That's my personal goal.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guest, Demarius Robinson, ASU's newest running back commit. Joe, the season preview, we are now in full swing. We are going to be back each and every week. Our TV show is going to be back weekly starting Thursday, August 1st. It's a lot of fun. Our last monthly special will be coming on the air on Arizona's Family Sports Network on July 18th. A lot of good stuff that's happening, so you got to make sure you stay with us on the social media side of things, especially as updates with both of our live appearances coming up here next month. You can follow us on Twitter at SOTD Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/SOTD Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Subscribe on YouTube and give me a follow on social media at bdenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy42. A huge thank you, as always, to our awesome sponsors, Jones Auto Group, DevilsDigest.com, Burrito Express, Spaghetti Shack, Sun Devil Family Charities, which, of course, we must mention that the live show we are doing at 100 Mile Brewing Company on August the 17th, the part of the proceeds will benefit Sun Devil Family Charities. And then, of course, Cactus Sports, where we will be located on August the 3rd. And some very hot and interesting late-breaking news that I think just went through the chutes today is that Cactus Sports will now be selling merchandise from yet another sponsor that we have that Brad will now mention.
HomeFieldApparel.com. Use offer code SOTD23 at checkout for 15% off your first order, or now head down to Mill Avenue and buy some great swag at Cactus Sports. I believe pre-orders are open now. So a lot of good stuff there. An amazing Sun Devil collection that is out there right now. Jackets, shirts, hoodies, that's some great joggers as well. Make sure
I think that promo code is only, to my knowledge, good with Home Field's actual website. Correct.
On HomeFieldApparel.com, SOTD23. So check them out and also give us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. We'd really appreciate it. It'd be super swell. Joe and I will be back next week for our annual countdown of the 10 most important non-quarterback Sun Devil players for 2024.